Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Joe Lowery, and with Taylor Rockwell out there confusing us all with long grammatical sentences that apparently are real things in Buffalo, New York, it is me hosting today's show, and I am joined by the one, the only Jeff Rueter to talk all things Major League Soccer. Jeff, how are you? It is lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you, too. Yeah, we had we did 2 episodes in a week, and then you took a week off. We needed space, but we're back. And, of course, Taylor didn't want to be... So we'll figure it out. We'll figure out if we can actually get all 3 of us on an episode again. I'm getting worried.
I think what we're trying to figure out, can we get all 3 of our DPs together, right, is what a lot of MLS teams are facing. A lot of teams trying to figure out, should we keep this guy, should we not keep this guy? One thing that Jeff hasn't kept is the art behind him, which threw me for a massive loop. For YouTube viewers out there, if you're watching, don't worry. Everything's okay. It seems like Jeff is fine. He's not been taken hostage. Jeff, is everything okay?
Yeah, it's every summer window comes with some difficult decisions, and you want to think about the longevity and continuity, but at the same point, you have to take what the market's giving you. And right now, we're going through just kind of a little bit of a reinvention of our art in the house, and so we have made the decision to transfer the red Saint-Denis art piece into the living room behind the couch. And so we have the funds, we have the art allocation space right here. Our roster is compliant, and we'll be announcing decisions before the window closes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a very professional way to be thinking about all that. I'm heartbroken personally as a fan, but it is what it is, frankly. It is what
and
it
I
is.
should say, we would like to thank the Red Saint-Denis paint for its contributions to this podcast and a background for over the years. And, we wish it nothing but the best in the living room.
This man has read too many press releases throughout his time and been in too many press conferences. Let's get right in. Before we do, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show for extra stuff. One of the things you get if you do become a patron of ours is Discord access. And I will tell you, as Tom Bogert was breaking the Djordje Mihailovic trade from Colorado to Toronto yesterday, that was the place to be. Like, I immediately, I'd seen the news on social media, and I hopped in the Discord, and 3 people, 4 people, a dozen people were already talking about it. It is legit one of my favorite places to be. So if you want to come and hang out, that's a good spot to do it. Jeff's in there, I'm in there, we have a good time. Jeff, let us start with the Djordje trade. And this is going to be our first segment, maybe even more than our first segment. I think there are so many interesting angles of this to parse, and I hope we do all of them. This was a blockbuster deal that Tom Bogert broke yesterday. Trade details. Toronto FC received Djordje Mihailovic. Colorado received a club record $8 million transfer fee. Cash. This is a cash trade in Major League Soccer, plus another $1 million in add-ons and a sell-on clause. I don't know if they'll get anything from that. But that is a lot of money. It is more money than we've ever seen change hands in a cash trade outside of the Evander deal that took him from Portland to Cincinnati. This is a big offer for Colorado. This is a big offer and a big deal for the league as a whole. The other background on this from Tom, before we actually parse into the individual stakeholders here. Apparently, Colorado had rejected multiple offers already for Djordje. It seems like from within the league, but finally pulled the trigger after Djordje came to them and said, hey, I would like to leave. Unrelated, not. Can we bring Not back? I'm going to try to bring Not back. Unrelated, not, is that Djordje and Toronto are working on a new contract for Djordje Mihailovic. I imagine there's some dollar signs that you're seeing there. Go get your bag, Djordje. That's completely fine. Jeff, I imagine, I mean, this is a big deal. I imagine that Toronto fans are probably happier about all of this than Colorado, right? Colorado fans, I should say. So maybe we start with them in all of this. And we can go lots of different places. We'll get all the thoughts out. But maybe starting with Toronto because they get the new shiny thing rather than the absence of a thing on the field. What do you make of this deal for a Toronto team that is very much in the middle of a rebuild, going out there earlier than I thought? I'll just say that much. This is earlier than I thought Toronto would go and make a splash, and yet here we are.
And maybe it makes sense that this first splash would come from within the league, right? Just to ensure as you build the rest of this next iteration of like Toronto FC, the squad evolution and all these sorts of things, that you do have one of your designated players determined to be domestic, which will help for your international slots, and then you already can control, basically, this is what the salary is going to be because that's part of the acquisition. From their perspective, I mean, you're getting a guy who has proven himself as a really high level, maybe not like an MVP caliber, but like it's not hard to squint and be like Djordje Mihailovic could make a couple of MLS best 11s between now and the end of his time with Toronto, or would have with Colorado for that matter. Like, I think that he has that well-rounded capability. He's gotten better on dead balls, which always will help with players racking up goals and assists. And he's about to turn 27 in November. And if you're looking at it from a Toronto perspective, you brought in a player before they turned 27. They have proven themselves in the league proper. They have played for the men's national team. They've also had some success with the Olympic team. So there is some just kind of proven cachet there. It not necessarily, again, think about this like a decade ago, bringing in Sasha Kljestan, Lee Win, one of those, where Benny Feilhaber maybe a bit earlier in his career, where you're looking and saying this is a player who is going to be proven successful. They can get assists, they can get goals, and they will work well within a structure. So I think that this is pretty much a no-brainer for Toronto, and frankly, any team in MLS. Like, if Djordje Mihailovic is available, if you have the budget space for it, and if you have the need for a creative attacking midfielder, you could do a lot worse. And there are a lot bigger gambles that could not come off than getting a player like Djordje.
Yeah, he's a sure thing, right? That's what you're talking about here. I like this deal for Toronto because we know that Djordje will be productive there. I think about this with coaches, Jeff, and I think Nancy is a really good example of this in Major League Soccer. If you can go out there and find a manager who is clearly transformed and had an impact on a team in MLS, who has worked with the roster constraints, who has navigated all of the weirdness of this league, if you can go out there and find that person and acquire them from within the league, I think there is huge value there. And you can apply that to every single position across the sporting structure of a club, right? You can apply that to a CSO. You can apply that also to a player. And Djordje has not just done it in Colorado. He did it in Montreal. And granted, he did it in Montreal with Wilfried Nancy, so that is like the easy. That's playing Montreal in easy mode. But there's still some challenges there, right? He has done it, Djordje, across two clubs. And it, in this case, and you got it this well, is not like superstar MVP kind of stuff, but it is fringe best 11, 15 to 20 non-penalty goal contributions a season for most of his last several years in MLS. That's where we're at. He is, I think, a DP that I would be very comfortable being the second best player on my team. I would prefer it if he was the third best player on my team. But either way, he is a very, very solidly good designated player. Not a superstar in my mind in this league. Otherwise, Colorado probably would have been better, and maybe we wouldn't be here. But he is a very useful player that you can rely on. And finding sure things is very difficult. And Djordje is basically as close as you get to a sure thing in MLS. Now, a lot of the pushback that I'd seen about this, and there was some of this in the Discord too, and I can understand it, is that's a lot of money for Djordje Mihailovic. Like $8 million, ain't nobody else outside of Major League Soccer paying $8 million for Djordje Mihailovic, a player who's already gone over to Europe, did not stick there in the Eredivisie, and came back. You are not going to get this kind of value, Colorado, from anybody else on that side of things. In Toronto, you paid a lot of money. But my pushback on that narrative, which I think has been very common, is that if we're talking about the perceived value of a player, there's a lot of DPs in MLS that are worse. And I don't know that that's a great argument. But there's the first prong is there's a lot of guys who are worse. I think about all of Atlanta's DPs at the moment, all of Austin's DPs at the moment, Manu Garcia in Kansas City, Pedro de la Vega in Seattle. Lucho in Dallas is another cash trade guy, right? Like, and those are just fees. There are other players that didn't come in for as big of fees, but are just not productive designated players in this league. And Djordje will be that. And on top of that, Jeff, is the component that for Toronto, it's not as if spending $8 million on Djordje, who's going to be a DP regardless, right? It's not as if spending $8 million on him means that you can't go out and build the rest of your roster. Like, that's how the DP rule works, is that you can spend whatever you want on those guys as long as ownership's not going to get shy about it, which clearly they're not, by the way. As long as ownership's not going to get scared and stop spending because one player didn't work out or two Italians didn't work out or whatever it is, you're fine. So Toronto can spend whatever they want on Djordje. I think this is them absolutely making a play for a proven guy that they think they can count on as a cornerstone piece of their next era. And for me, I have a hard time finding fault with that.
And by the way, keep in mind, there is no actually established market, valuation at the transfer market. And think about this sort of akin to the argument that nowhere but MLS would pay these fees. Yeah, no kidding. Of course. Because he's more valuable to an MLS team because he's proven himself in MLS than any other league. You don't have to worry about transfer of fit and his ability to play Wednesday, Saturday in Texas road legs, right? You don't have to worry about any of this sort of stuff, right? First of all, you're going to get more goals and assists from a living, breathing human playing soccer than a bag of money. So let's start with that. So don't get precious over rich people spending $2 more million than you think they should have. They're rich. They can spend it. It's okay. It's not our money. Just let them do it. It's fine. Second of all, think of it like the England tax. So when you talk about like transfers in the Premier League or championship to the Premier League, often you will talk about it in the lens of, well, for homegrown registration reasons, Lewis Hall is worth more than you might say for like a Joel Neves at that point of his career, which is like an insane thing to think. But he would have transferred for more money within the Premier League because at that point Neves is like an 18-year-old who had never left home before. And Lewis Hall, for registration purposes, is valuable, is versatile, can play different roles, and is young. So he is worth more in the Premier League than he would ever be to a club in the Bundesliga, in Serie A, in Major League Soccer. It doesn't matter what we're talking about there. Kind of a similar thing establishing itself right now with the cash trade market. And I wish I had gone through and already pulled up like the list of all of them, but we're already starting to see some sort of new benchmarks of sorts where it's like if you want to get a playmaker, like the asking price starts here. If you're trying to get a more like speculative young player fit, like Zhang Sang-bin and Jack McGlynn, great that they rhyme, but like they went for very similar fees. And it made no sense at the time. It was like, how did Minnesota get that much for like a very kind of struggling rotational piece, whereas Jack McGlynn is a fringe national team World Cup, hopeful. But the idea still ultimately comes back to you open this cash trade market because there is more value to find if you can sell within your league. Djordje will be a more valuable asset to Toronto FC than he would be for someone who mostly paid attention to when he was at AZ in the Eredivisie of Holland, right? And I think that just, the last thing with that is clubs wanted this, right? Because Colorado paid $3 million to bring him back over from the Netherlands, and now they're able to sell him for $8 million. That is exactly what clubs want out of the transfer market, and they're finding it very difficult to be able to do that without selling within MLS.
Yeah, at least that's what Colorado want out of the transfer market. And one of the things I'm curious about with the cash trade market, which I want to get more to in just a second, but is that maybe we're going to see more stratification between teams. Like, it's hard for me not to look at this as a glimpse into the MLS hierarchy in a way, and I think that's part of what has Colorado fans smarting so much after this deal, is that, hey, we just lost our guy to another team in our same league. Like, they were willing to allocate. They thought this player was worth more than we did. And we didn't value them enough to keep them and try to compete with this group. And I think that stings. And it's interesting to see those levels play out and actually start to bubble up to the surface. I want to stick with Toronto. This is my last thing on Toronto, sure. and then we can move to Colorado. This move is a sign that ownership isn't done investing in Toronto after all of the money they lit on fire with Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi. It sounded to me like they'd canceled the credit card. Charlie Boehm had this quote from Jason Hernandez in a really good piece he did after the Italians were moved on. The quote is, "It's reasonable to say, certainly from a salary perspective, we should not expect ownership to be these unique outliers in the league." That is GM Jason Hernandez of Toronto FC. Apparently, salary was a specific word that was used there because, yes, Insigne was a salary outlier, Bernardeschi to an extent. But they're clearly dropping cash, like dropping what could, basically you're bordering 8 figures here, excuse me. That's a lot of money for these guys. That's a lot of money to drop on Djordje, and I thought that maybe they were going to be a bit more hesitant to dip back into big transfer outlays after how badly they'd been burned. But for all of the reasons we've said about the fact that Djordje's produced across multiple clubs, he is someone that you can rely on. They clearly are willing to continue to back this club and to back Jason Hernandez in his first big move for a player like Djordje, who is just a polar opposite DP signing to the ones that they brought in before. The only thing that is common is that they spent a lot of money to acquire those players. So Toronto, I would be pretty happy right now if I was a Toronto FC fan. I think there's a lot to like about this side of the deal. Jeff, for Colorado, I want to start here. I think 2 things can be true for the Rapids here. 1, they got a haul for Djordje Mihailovic. $8 million is a ton of money. It is more than they got from Nice, a far bigger club than Toronto FC in a lot of ways, for Moise Bombito, a Canadian full international, like budding, talented young center back. Yeah. It's a massive deal, and it's certainly more money than Djordje was worth to anybody else outside of Toronto, it seems. So we talked about some of that. But that's point 1. Point 2, selling Djordje makes them worse for the foreseeable future and certainly tanks their 2025 season. Jeff, it sounds like you agree with my list. Tell me how good it is.
Yeah, it's a great list because I think it's also the right order. Like, the decision was probably made because of the former, which is, wow, $8 million for Djordje Mihailovic in this economy. That's great. Cool. Sure. Let's go for it. And I think that the transfer market doesn't usually follow inflation, by the way, if you were just kind of curious about that. These things generally are, I don't know. It makes its own denominations regardless of actual currency trends. But no, I think that when you look at this trade from Colorado's perspective, it's opportunity. And this is where you get into maybe what we were talking about with the schedule change a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, this is why clubs get frustrated. It's just very funny when it happens within your own league. Like, you can't really say, like, unfortunately, like, matters out of our hands. Usually when you see a move like this and a player's key number 10 leaves in late July, early August, it's because a club from Europe has come in their off season and got their heads turned, and now there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like, it's not that, which is just very funny because that market probably would have still been there in the winter, I would imagine. I don't think that there's urgency from Toronto's side to get him in the door for a playoff push, right? It's for integration into the system. It's for familiarity with Robin Fraser.
It's because it's mostly for Toronto because they didn't want to lose him, because there absolutely was going to be there was going to be more interest in Djordje, and I think there was even more interest in Djordje than just Toronto. Like, in this window, teams are calling about a lot of DPs across the league, not just Djordje. So anyway, continue. But yes, there's certainly interest in the winter because a lot of teams are going to be involved.
Yeah, so like it's the buyer's urgency more than the seller's, right? And so that's where, when they reject the moves twice and then Djordje comes up and says, I want to raise. Well, this is a byproduct of operating the way that the Kroenkes have operated the Colorado Rapids, and the way that you see it with John Fisher's group in San Jose, with Greg Kerfoot's group historically up until very recently, suddenly in Vancouver, the Hunt family in Dallas. This is a byproduct of it. You are going to be able to offer X amount of dollars, and you are only going to go that far. And Minnesota and Philadelphia are in there as well, but they have different ways that they get around these sorts of issues. If you can't keep up with the raises your players' performances are going to demand, they're going to want to leave. And it will be up to you then to turn around and find the replacement. Now, I doubt that they were expecting that they had to replace Djordje Mihailovic in this window. So I'm not sure who they would turn to at that point to be able, like, and I don't know necessarily if they'll have their short list where they immediately go around and reinvest those, like you might see with some other clubs who are expecting these moves, like Thiago Almada leaving Atlanta United after the World Cup, right? The other thing, though, that's interesting is I'm just not sure. There were some complications of fit necessarily with him next to Cole Bassett. And I think that you looked at it and it looked like it could have been a very modern sort of double attacking midfielder, operate through the half spaces sort of thing. But if for whatever reason Chris Armas didn't like using that system, you actually do have an opportunity now to either incorporate more width, get someone in at Kevin Cabral's location of the field on a higher wage or whatever the case may be, or you could set yourself up structurally more defensive minded, whatever the case may be. There is a lot that they can operate with now as a result of that. But it's just very interesting where, like, I was talking about Colorado with someone around the league 2 days ago on Sunday, and talking about them as like one of those top teams in that next tier, where in the Western Conference you had like San Diego, who has been the one consistently good team all year in the conference. You have like 4 teams that I'm pretty confident are going to be contending to reach the conference final and could threaten San Diego's path to MLS Cup. And you've got LAFC, you've got the Seattle Sounders, and then you've got the Vancouver Whitecaps and Minnesota United. And it was like right there that I was like, I think that next group where it's like they could be a really difficult first round matchup because of some of the talent on hand, because of the coaching, and because of their familiarity as a core with this league, would be the Colorado Rapids, who went on that run to the Leagues Cup last year, and I think saw a lot of potential with this group. And now suddenly they're fully dropped into like the bottom of that tier first round scares. It's just a very particular, it's just kind of hard to find the words that aren't like going to immediately sound inflammatory here. But it does seem like a prioritization over take the opportunity rather than what opportunity have we created for ourselves on the field and that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I don't fully blame Colorado for this. And
sure.
I'm gonna make the bull case for this move in a minute, because I think there is like maybe something compelling that I'm increasingly drawn to. But I don't really blame Colorado for recognizing that they're not good enough to win something this year. Like, Jeff, when you're talking about them being the top
fair.
team in that tier, that's the third best tier of teams in one conference. Like
in the weaker conference this year.
In the weaker conference, absolutely. I do not think the Rapids are going to win trophies this year. I just don't. It seems like they thought the same thing, as we've learned.
Yeah.
But they've recognized that they needed to shuffle at center back. They moved on from Chidozie Awaziem because he wanted to go back to Europe and be closer to his family. They had shuffling to do there. They have not gotten enough out of their fullbacks this year. They're a bottom half team in terms of generating expected goals, non-penalty expected goals. They need more from their wingers.
You sound like Anthony Hudson when you talk like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not quite that, but they're a middling team with a middle group of players, right? I mean, that is this Rapids team. But if they needed to add a piece, and this is where I struggle with this move, if they needed to add a piece and they recognize that, hey, we're not quite there, we got to do something to change things up, they could have done that while keeping Djordje, right? It didn't have to be a one thing or the other thing. Kevin Cabral's gone. Like that deal can't hurt you anymore. That DP spot is open. So you had Djordje and Rafa Navarro as your 2 DPs and 3 U22s. You could have given, and this is the heart of the matter as far as I think. And you got to this, Jeff. You could have given Djordje a good faith pay raise, and you could have bought a DP winger. And I think all of a sudden you shuffle your center backs as they're doing it and have already done this window, and you say, hey, Reggie and Sam, we need a little bit more from you guys. And you're a team that could jump up to that next tier in the Western Conference and could be contending for a home playoff series and maybe even something more than that on your day. But it doesn't sound like the Rapids were wanting to give Djordje the kind of money that Toronto's going to give him. At the end of the day, that is where the disconnect seems to be here. And so you're not going to get that Djordje and Navarro and the existing core plus a new DP, which is what I thought was going to happen when Kevin Cabral left. Instead, to take a step forward, you're kind of trying to take a step back first. So that I think stings the Rapids because you lose your talisman in a lot of ways. And yes, you can go and get a new player. And I'm sure they're going to get at least one, if not 2, new players with all of this. But you could have gotten a new player on top of Djordje. I know that is sort of like an simplified view because there is allocation money and all of this and this and that.
Sure.
And there are other components that means it is more nuanced than time will basically allow us to get into today. But if I'm a Rapids fan, I'm frustrated. Not because Djordje being around meant that we were going to win stuff this year. I don't think that was the case. I wouldn't have seen that if I was a Rapids fan. But because we could have built something on top of what we had, and there was a lot to like about what the Rapids had. So that is, I think, the top-line bear case for this move. Jeff, maybe let's take a quick break. Let's come back. I want to give the bull case for why I think this move is maybe not such a bad idea, and then I want to talk cash trades. So let's pause, listener. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. Thanks for sticking with us. Jeff, I want to give the bull case for this Djordje trade from a Colorado perspective. And I think I've warmed to it to the point where I believe it with like 30% of my being. So I don't really believe
that's
this,
substantial. No,
but it's not nothing. It's not zero. So
it's taking up a genuine portion of your heart right now.
Very much so. 70% still like, man, it would have been pretty slick to keep Djordje and add like I thought you were going to do. But here's the case for it. This year's done for the Rapids. I laid that out already. I think that's all fine. It was already done before you sell Djordje. That's 9th in the West, 10th worst expected goal differential. They're done. Selling Djordje now is not any worse as a result than selling him in the winter. Like it just doesn't matter, right? I don't think what's going to happen between now and December 31st is going to be meaningful for Colorado. And selling him could potentially position you for 2026 and beyond in a better place because it allows you to go to that 2 DP for U22 roster model. And basically no team in MLS has used their U22 spots as well as Colorado. There are 3 U22s right now. Cole Bassett, who I think is a very, very good MLS player. I actually don't think there was any fit problems with him and Djordje. I think Bassett is a really, really good number 8 in a double pivot. I think that worked well. Bassett is very good. Josh Atencio, who I think is one of the better young defensive midfielders in MLS, certainly a starting level player, maybe even better than that. Easier for me to say, Ted Kudipietro is the most speculative of that bunch, but has certainly shown some things this year. And I think is a great player to use a U22 slot on. Those are all good to very good MLS players. And the Rapids, now by moving on from Djordje, means they can still add a senior DP next to Navarro, who's currently their only DP. And I fully expect, whether it's now or in the winter, they will do exactly that. You can have a new DP and another U22, maybe even from within the league. Like all 3 of those, I mean, Bassett is a different story, I suppose, but Atencio and Kudipietro were traded from within Major League Soccer to Colorado. You can go out there and get another good to very good MLS starting player as a U22, which has huge cap benefits. Sign another DP with your money that you've just made and have made from a couple of big sales in the last couple of transfer windows. And also have that $2 million in allocation money down the roster because you get that extra cash when you go to the 2 DP 4 U22 model to make them stronger across the board. I think there's a legit argument because the Rapids have been so good with their U22s that says, hey, there's a world in which, we got to find somebody with a chunk of change that can replace Djordje. We can find that U22. It's going to take a little bit of time, but is it at least possible that at this time next year, the Rapids ceiling is higher than it is right now? I think it's possible. I don't think this is just a full-on, you've lit your next 5 years on fire sort of move. That's not how MLS works, and Djordje is not that quality of a player where it is so tragic to do something like this. Again, 70% of me is still like, I probably would not have done this. But can I kind of see a world in which the Rapids are okay for this? Maybe even better than okay in a year? Yeah, I got to admit, I can kind of see it somewhere in there. I'm probably overthinking it, though.
No, but I'm with you. I think I can see it so long as what comes next justifies it, right? Like I'm kind of pulling a parallel to when Sasha Kljestan was traded from the Red Bulls, where he had just... That was like the peak of his like return to MLS was with the New York Red Bulls. He was part of those great Jesse Marsch teams, and then gets traded for Tommy Redding and a bag of balls and some vouchers for orange juice when next time they're in Florida. And it doesn't quite work out and then he starts bouncing around club to club, and then New York doesn't really bring in another crucial playmaker until Emil Forsberg, and that's when they get back to MLS Cup. But it takes them half a decade to realize that they're missing that, and they tried other stylistic things and really going all in on Red Bull football and all that sort of stuff. Chris Armas, ironically, was also there at the time. But you think about it also when Djordje left Chicago for Montreal, that was seen as sort of an opportunity lost, and that's because it was an allocation money trade, right? But if you are able to get $8 million, the reason that you are willing to say yes, as Joe said, is the exact same reason why it doesn't matter if you did it now or in the winter if you're thinking long-term for Colorado. You weren't more likely to win MLS. There are players who could make you more likely to win MLS Cup based on your constraints and your restrictions with that $8 million plus salary than Djordje Mihailovic.
Yes.
There is opportunity there. And so, again, how they go about that, how they want to find someone who fits with Rafa and Navarro is going to be crucial as well. But, I think that you're absolutely spot on. I think that this could set them up to be better off. And they do have a very, very good sporting operation. They have one of the best recruitment and scouting and analytics departments in all of Major League Soccer. They have decision makers who have proven that they can get out of seemingly difficult problems pretty nimbly and gracefully in a way that makes Colorado look sustainable and fun more now. I think that's the crucial part, is they've also now had the track record where it's engaging and successful, which then means it invigorates the fan base more than it does necessarily if you're just doing like results, who cares what they look like stuff. So I think that there is potential here for Colorado, but it is tough as you get into these final dozen games or so of the regular season just to look and say, okay, they maybe left something here. But how much, to our main point, I don't know how much they really left after all.
Yeah, huge question marks as far as what's next for Colorado. I think they've got a lot of work to do, and they've got to nail the probably two signings that they're going to make on the back of this deal at the top of the roster. It's going to be hard. And ultimately, I would have just rather handed Djordje a new deal that would have made him happy and kept him there for the rest of his career, and then added another adult senior DP on top of all that, then make it a little bit more complicated. But here we are. But I do think there is a world in which that the Rapids don't look foolish for this in a year's time. Let's close out on all this with the cash trade rule rocks. Man, this stuff is so much fun. Like MLS, I'll do my spiel and then I'll let you go, Jeff. Mm-hmm. The spiel is that MLS needs more reasons for people to care about it. I kind of did this in All-Star when we were recording in the mighty studio that we recorded.
That's right, in the studio.
I think the All-Star game should exist because MLS fans of one team don't have enough reasons to care about what's happening on the other teams. And if you watch your All-Star, you might see Evander. If you watch your All-Star, you might see Diego Luna or whatever, and actually start to care about some of these other teams and players. And you know what's better than caring about another team? Hating another team. And that is what the cash trade rule does, is it gives Colorado fans a reason to root against Toronto and actually check in and do all of these things. Cross-pollination is good for MLS. It's great for the narratives. Having like actual hot stove discussion with players that people already know and not just, hey, the Timbers signed a DP winger that nobody's ever heard of before. I'm not trying to disparage that, but that is happening, by the way. But,
yeah,
I mean,
spoilers.
This stuff is better. This stuff is more fun to talk about. There's a reason why we're leading with this on the show than so many other things we could be leading with. I love this rule. It was a layup for MLS. I think it was a layup for MLS.
I think so,
and
too.
it is bearing out in a major way. I love it. I'm having a great time.
Of the like simple changes they could have made to their rule book that could have had the most immediate hit rate, allowing teams to just hand each other money like they would any other club in any other league in the world. Like, yeah, that was the one. There have been 8 moves so far that have commanded at least 7 figures on the cash trade market. Just so you know, this is the 8th one of them. The $8 million move for Djordje is the 8th. Sinner.
Easy
we
to
love
remember.
these sorts
That's
of things,
clever.
right?
Yeah, really good.
So here we go. See if we can spot. I just want your gut reactions as you hear these names, from most lucrative, most opulent to the most attainable for the common man. Ready?
Okay.
Here we go. The most expensive, Evander to Cincinnati for $12 million US. Second, Djordje Mihailovic now. Going to Toronto for 8. Third, $5 million, Luciano Acosta to FC Dallas, kicking off that little Texas 3-step. A bit of a tie here on $4 million for Daniel Gazdag and Dejan Joveljic. And then you've got Jack McGlynn at 2.1, Sangbin Jean at 1.6, and then you have Ted Ku-DiPietro, who is actually on 1.4, up to 1.4 of actual cash, not allocation. So those are your 8. And then you can throw in some cheaper moves. Like there's one for Noel Buck and one for Ibrahim Aliou. So those are the 10 so far. Yeah. And creativity. Like that's the main theme here is when you look, this is teams who usually would be gambling on Alan Velasco and Facundo Torres and Tomas Chacon and these like playmakers who are just like really unproven, Luis Araujo, like these sort of guys who you're just really speculative on your fit, and you bring them in and you see what you have and they don't work and you're stuck with them for 2.5 years, and Toronto lived through this just now. And so instead what you can do is, again, survey and say, this guy works in these settings, he works in this system, he works in this league. Yes, I would like to invest, and I'm willing to meet the valuation of the selling club because I am more confident that he will do what I need him to do once he gets here. Like, it's working as designed. I think it is such a good evolution of the rule book, and I think it is one that actually, like, it doesn't help with the salary budget discussion and whether that's too high or too low. No one's saying it's too high, really. I saw one person actually this last week that's like, if MLS doesn't want to be one of the best leagues in the world, it should have a stricter salary cap. And I was like,
did that person own CF Montreal out of curiosity? Or?
Yeah, clearly just had stock in like just Montreal and Dallas. Gotcha. And was like, yes, we need more profit. But like, I think most people would argue that needs to be higher, and this doesn't change that. But what it does do is gives you more ways to operate outside the cap on your designated player slots, where you can, circumvent the rule book, as Joe said in segment 1, and good things can happen. And like, I don't know, I think it's a very interesting little market that's sort of popped up, and the valuations, when I read them off like that, I don't know, it sounds pretty coherent, doesn't it?
I mean, it sounds coherent with like a 25% inflation, honestly, of kind of what I would expect some of these players to be moving for outside. So
like Evander for $10 million like feels more right than 12, sure. Yeah.
I think that's right where we are. And Djordje, could we have seen Djordje go to Belgium again? I mean, Djordje's a weird case because he'd already done the European thing, and I think that makes it harder to go back. So maybe he's not a great example. But Jack McGlynn, could I have seen a team from Europe coming in and paying something for him? Yeah, I mean, I think these MLS teams are paying a premium for these guys. And when I hesitated on it being a layup, which I posted yesterday, and I think it is a layup, but the one hesitation I had about the cash trade rule and it becoming like a big thing, and I would say by now it's a big thing. Like we have reached 2 windows worth of moves, including in-season moves, like late in-season moves in the case of Djordje.
Yeah, this is the kicker. This changes
This
it.
is the
it
one
feels
that
more
I
real,
think
doesn't
totally
it?
locks it in 100%, because before, I mean, you laid it out well, right? Before, if somebody's leaving, it's they're going to go to a big European team and you can't stop them and whatever. This feels preventable in a way. Like, you hand Djordje a little extra cash and none of this happens, right?
Right.
The one hesitation I had for this rule is that teams inside of MLS were not going to be willing to pay a premium for MLS guys. Like, they were going to be too attached to the idea of wanting to go and sign their DPs, right? Hey, I'm Cincinnati. I want to go find my guy. Like, I think I can get better value. I think I can get a better player. There's some ego involved here, right? I mean, I would fall victim to this in those roles. Like, I want to go do the work, and I want to receive the credit for it. Now, we're not really crediting Chris Albright for discovering Evander. I mean, there doesn't take a lot of skill to pull that off. But teams have been willing to pay the premium. Cincinnati were. Dallas clearly were. I mean, they clearly were willing to give Lucho more money, or to give Cincy more money than Argentine clubs were. Right?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
no one
Lucho,
in the world was going to pay $4 million in a transfer fee for
Lucho said he wanted to go back to Argentina, and all of a
Right.
sudden he's in Dallas and saying, "Man, I'm so happy here." Like something happened there, and what happened was that Cincy couldn't get what they wanted from other clubs. Right? Yeah. Philly got better money for Gazdag than they were going to get anywhere else on the planet. From Columbus, they got a good deal there. You run through the list, and teams have proven that they're willing to pay for proven talent. And I don't really blame them for that. But I didn't know if that was going to be the case, because I think there is an allure to going out there, as I said, and finding your guys. That maybe some teams are abiding by that principle, like probably some are. But more clubs than I thought already have hopped on this train. More are going to hop on the train. Like more team, I can say with like absolute certainty that teams are calling other teams with like real intent to go out there and like, I would like your DP. What do I need to do to get it done? I think that has already happened for players that have already moved via this cash trade mechanisms, that have had multiple offers for these guys. I also will say this, and then I'm done on this, Jeff. If you have anything else laid out, or we'll keep going. I think we are not done with the cash trades this summer. So I think when the window closes here, when it closes, can't remember when. That's my bad. Soon-ish. Next week, I think it is. Next Thursday. Something
right.
like that.
Let me look it up.
Before the window closes, I think there's a very, very good chance that there are like more cash trade dominoes, or maybe just domino to fall. So we'll see what that looks like. But I said it already, I'm having a great time. Like, this stuff is so fun. I was just juiced all day yesterday thinking about talking about this on the show today. I'm having a blast.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, in reverse order, the window's open until August 21st, so there's still a couple more weeks for these where, like, you could also get some more desperation where player gets hurt, player gets sold, whatever, you need to react, right? And so that's good. Like, you have a safer net to do it. Another thing, so the information I have, Curtis, thank you to Elliot McKinley. I sounded the klaxon when I said I didn't have the list in front of me to a group of friends, and he delivered from American Soccer Analysis, holler. But this list also does specify, most of these also have like escalators, like bonuses, like if you sell for this much, or if he scores this many goals, plays this many games, whatever, you owe us more money, right? And so, like, we're already talking about Jack McGlynn, $2.1 million. Maybe that was more than you would get from Rangers in Scotland or whatever. Well, Philly could also get an extra $1.3 million, right? And Lucho Acosta, if he hits performance metrics, which it doesn't look like he will at this rate, but who knows what they were, right? Maybe it was just pure minutes and scowls and stuff like that. That's another $1 million that you could get there, right? Gazdag, $500,000. Ibrahim Aliou, $450,000 up front, but $750K if he does well in Columbus, right? Like, these sorts of things also help selling clubs have that sort of peace of mind that, like, hey, if he goes and he pops off, we can still get more kickback for us. And so up front, the fees look pretty good, but you can also make more. So I think that it does incentivize clubs to consider when those offers do come in, and I think that had to happen for this market to work, is for selling clubs to want to participate. And so far, it looks like they've found it very easy to hop into this particular song and dance.
I like it. All right, well, that is our very thorough, I think, look at the Djordje trade in the micro and the macro, all the stakeholders involved, except Djordje. Hope he has a good time, makes a lot of money, and makes Toronto better. Yeah. Let's do, Jeff, let's do one or two players on our next segment before we go to break. So we are going to move into our favorite or moves that we think are interesting or just haven't talked about of moves of the summer window so far. So things that haven't really come up so much on the show or haven't come up in this way. I don't think we're going to bring up Rodrigo de Paul today. We're going to try to hit some things we haven't talked about so much. So Jeff, let's start with you. Hit me with one of your moves of the summer for whatever the reasoning is, something that you are intrigued by. Where are you taking us?
I should probably keep one of the the most famous guy on my list by far for segment 3, so that people will stick around through the commercials. So I know how this works. That's showbiz. Come on now. I won't give you that, but stay tuned. There's one you have definitely heard of. Instead, let's go with Orlando City taking a gamble on Tyrese Spicer.
All right, this is perfect. This is perfect. Say more.
Say more. First overall pick in 2024. This is a little bit of like fake trivia that I played with like you and Taylor a few weeks ago. Who was the first overall pick, right? Well, he's been traded.
Tyler Spicer. That's my bad.
Exactly. Yeah, and you were still closer. Tyrese Spicer moves for $500,000 of general allocation money. The spreadsheet that I'm seeing says there could be up to $50. I think that's $50,000 in further incentives, but it would be very funny if it was like, yeah, I'm going to give you a $50 bill. Just go bribe burritos for your department. I think it's a really interesting move because I think that we haven't really gotten to see, and part of this is just like a symptom of Toronto. We haven't really got to see what Tyrese Spicer can do at the MLS level, because for the entirety of his tenure, by and large, he was playing in a very imperfectly built team around Bernadeschi and Insigne. He also, for the majority of it, was playing under a poor coach, Son Heung-min, right? So, like, we just haven't really gotten to see what he can do. And I know that there was some, like, how is he going to project? Is he going to be a finesse forward when he gets to MLS? He's clearly a winger. I think that the way that he's been playing is very clearly a left winger. In fact, of attacking players and midfielders, any forward, any midfielder who's played 800 minutes so far this season, no one spends more time in a particular wing than Tyrese Spicer has spent on the left wing, so the left third of the attacking half. 91.4% of his touches in the attacking half come on the left side. That is so lopsided, but that does suggest that he wants to cross, possibly. That's the only way that makes sense, right? The thing is, he's been a much more accurate crosser when he keeps the ball on the ground than when he chips it over a defender or two. So in theory, you actually want him like closer to the box. So maybe you bring him into the half space. Maybe it's like an AZ Jackson sort of thing where you saw St. Louis try this and make him more of kind of like a true invert. Like, don't even worry about the wing sort of inverted winger. Like, I think that he could actually be a really creative force if you get him to keep the ball on the ground. He's a very good progressive carrier. His progressive carry rate, 30.4%. That's about Jaden Nelson and Denny Bouanga territory. He's actually just above both of them in terms of how often he advances the ball with his dribble, which is good to see. He takes as many take-ons per 100 touches he makes of the ball as Lionel Messi. That's fun. 12th of 230 forwards who have played as many minutes as I've told you. I think that there's a lot of potential that's still there. And I think that he's someone that we just haven't really talked about because we don't really talk about the Super Draft in the same reverent tone that we may be used to, right? And that's fair enough. I think that, you know, historical track record has shown that unless it's someone who's been coming through one of the major youth national teams of the continent, that usually they catch us off guard. But he's already established himself with Trinidad and Tobago. And, you know, I think it could be a very good, pretty low investment return for Orlando City, who needs just more options and more dynamism and younger players, you know, with how they've decided to build themselves around Luis Muriel. Like, more youth and more dribbling upfield, I think, is a good acquisition. So I like that one.
I totally agree. I think it's good value for Orlando. I know there's some Toronto fans out there that were disappointed they didn't get more in this deal. He's not a super sexy top-line kind of name, but it would not shock me if Orlando have him playing real minutes, like maybe even starting minutes. And it could be on the wing. It also could be at wingback, which is where we have seen him play some for Toronto as well, where he can use some of that two-way ability and the progressive carrying and his ability to get up the left that you talked about, Jeff.
Yeah.
I really do like that move. In Orlando, I think Orlando maybe I don't know if there's another domino to fall this summer or if there's a little bit more reshaping for them to do in the winter. It still feels like they are a shade off the absolute top teams.
Yeah.
And maybe that is Muriel, who has fallen off a bit and was really, really good and fun at the beginning of this season. Fun matters less than good, but he was both. And he hasn't been producing in that same way. But I think the Orlando front office has largely done a really good job in a lot of ways at turning over the squad and finding the right pieces. And I think Spicer is going to be a really, really sharp piece for them. So I like that shot, Jeff. Well done. Well played.
Thank you.
I'll do one of mine, and then we'll go to break. My first deal is actually a pair of deals because that's how I like to finesse the rules. San Diego FC signing Pedro Soma and David Vasquez. If you're saying who, don't worry, I'll tell you who in just a second. Maybe you're not saying who because you're a diehard like Jeff and I. The top line on this is that San Diego are going even further down the youth rabbit hole, and I love that. That's what these moves represent because these players are young players. They're both 19 years old. This is the micro before I zoom out and do the macro. Pedro Soma, 19-year-old U.S. U20 international, signed from Corellia in Spain, but spent last year at Barca B. So now we got another Barca B boy in MLS, which honestly I'm really here for. And I think if you're a possession-oriented team, you can do a lot worse than like looking hard at some of these players. Really savvy central midfielder. He has been one of my favorite players of the U20 crop. Sort of been waiting to figure out what his career was going to look like, if that was going to be at the senior level in Spain, if that was going to be somewhere else. He's got ties to Mikey Varas, Varas and Tyler Heaps both have deep ties to U.S. soccer, right? Like, word travels fast. These guys know each other. He's technically sharp, Pedro Soma, which makes him a really fun fit in midfield. I fully expect him to push for some minutes in the short term, but also in the long term, right? Think about San Diego. Ani Valakari, Luca De La Torre, both on loan with options. Annabelle Godoy has an option for next year as well. I would love to keep all those guys if I'm San Diego. But if you don't or can't or don't want to or for whatever reason, Pedro Soma, I think, is like a ready to be a starter on a good MLS team kind of young player. So I know that maybe a lot of folks won't have heard of him. I'm really high on him. Same with David Vasquez, who comes from the Philadelphia Union, 19 years old, on a loan deal with a permanent option from Philly for $100,000 in allocation money. Attacker, comfortable between the lines. He's a better fit for San Diego's system than he is for Philly's because he can play make. Great left foot, calm in tight spots, can change direction quickly, works hard off the ball. He was a Philly guy for at least a little bit of time. So there is some of that in there. I really like his game. He's also got U.S. Youth National Team ties. Was at the U17 World Cup 2 years ago. Has been involved in that U.S. Youth National Team setup. San Diego continue to find young talent, and they play young talent. And so far, that young talent looks really good. Like Luca Bombino is the guy who they plucked from LAFC. He's popping at left back right now to the point where European teams are like actually caring and starting to call about him and make real offers to San Diego. Bombino looks really good, and I've watched a lot of San Diego this year. He's a kid. Like he
looks like
teenager.
one of the best left backs in MLS this year, right? Like all the things that we've been saying about Alex Freeman, like take it to the left side, adjust it to scale because left backs, whatever. Like, he's been that good. He's been phenomenal. So leaning into this makes so much sense, right? They have the track record already.
100%. And they have that track record more than, I don't know, already like 25 other teams in MLS without an academy that's fully built. Like they have, I believe they finished building it. I guess I don't really know exactly where we're at, so I apologize for that. But they have constructed a residency academy on their campus. They're going to bring players in, have them live there, free to live, free to get your education, and that's not even really happened yet. Like we're still waiting for that crop of players. I believe that this will be the first school year that players are there and actually working on all of those things. It is wild for me to imagine that San Diego are doing all of this now without an academy that has players at senior age groups within the youth system. They're already, I don't know, better at this stuff than 25 teams in the league, and they don't even have the academy piece of this yet. The residency academy is coming. According to ESPN, San Diego want to have the highest operational budget on the youth academy of any team in Major League Soccer. They have the Right to Dream connection, where Right to Dream have an established track record of doing exactly that. And San Diego are doing it themselves right now, too, with Bombino and Oscar Verhoeven, and they just signed another U.S. Youth National Team kid from Germany. And you run through the list, this team is doing all of the right things on the youth development side. I think they're going to end up as the most committed MLS team when it comes to developing young players. They've stated that ambition. I think we're already seeing early signs that they're going to follow through. And this is even getting lost in the trees. I want to go back to the weeds. I think Soma and Vasquez are just good. Like they just started David Vasquez against Tigres in Leagues Cup the other day, and he played 60 minutes. Like they're going to give these guys minutes, and I think they're going to be rewarded for it because the talent eye is there in that front office. I wrote this for Backfield the other day. And by the way, as long as I'm pitching, by the time people are listening to this, I've got a pretty long readout on San Diego as a whole right now. So go check that on the site if that's sort of your thing. I wrote this the other day, though, and I think it's true. There is no MLS team right now that I am more bullish on. I'm just going to keep using the bear and bull thing today. I guess I'm really stuck in that rut. There's no MLS team that I'm higher on. I'll just put it that way. Like long term than San Diego. Like, and I'm not even sure how close it is. So anyway, I got lots of love for San Diego, Jeff. That was long on my part. I apologize. But fun young players. Who doesn't love fun young players? Come on.
Right.
This guy does. And that guy does. I like it. All right, let's go to break. We're going to come back with more signings that we think are interesting and fun. Stay with us if you want stuff that's interesting and fun. Goodbye. We're back. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Jeff, I want to flip back to you for another thing that you think is interesting and fun. And more than that, I want you to explain that tease you did earlier. I'm on pins and needles, Jeff. Everybody is. Tell us.
So who have you heard of? Think of soccer players you've heard of. And I think probably one of the first 10 players you'll think of, 20, Heung-min Son, is coming to Major League Soccer. Like that's just genuinely a fun sort of surprise development here. And I think that when you look at the how and the where, it makes a ton of sense. And I think that LAFC has done really, really well to recognize when something isn't working. And we had talked about it before them, so we're smarter than them, right? About how, like, when you had Olivier Giroud, it just wasn't a stylistic fit, and it wasn't going to work. I wrote about it in The Athletic in March. We talked about it in season preview stuff, or you did, I'm sure. And then we talked about it, like, a month later. Taylor was already trying to loan him off to the lowly LA Galaxy, right? Like, it was not working, right? And so rather than be stubborn and say we have him under contract and these sorts of things right after the Club World Cup, it was like, okay, this was the big moment. It didn't come off. Go back to France. Great. So, everyone said nice things. The press release was really amicable and all these sorts of things. They move on. The decision to move on from Olivier Giroud at the time they did opened their ability to be opportunistic when Son Heung-min decided that it made sense to leave Tottenham after winning the Europa League, right? And he's been there for a decade now. He had a really good, heartfelt press conference where he talked about, I arrived in London, I didn't even speak English, and now, helped Tottenham win the Europa League and all these things. He's the one that stayed, unlike Harry Kane, that sort of thing, right? So his legacy at Tottenham is like unimpeachable.
Yeah.
So at this point, 33 years old, you've still got some good soccer in the legs, wants to move on, decides he doesn't want to go to Saudi, and decides that LAFC is the best opportunity available for him. And that, again, that only happens because they don't have to worry about another veteran center forward. And I think that when you look stylistically, Son has proven himself to be better at adapting to the attackers around him stylistically, whereas I think Giroud is kind of a throwback where I am a true striker, I am a true center forward, I do striker and center forward things. I don't know why you're asking me to do all these newfangled off-ball runs, right? Like, it could work better. I think that it will be necessary, or maybe they will look better if they can find a way to actually have Son playing off of like that nominal number 9 leading line, whether that's Nathan Ordaz, maybe that's Jeremy Abobasi, but I think either of them could do just fine in that role. But I think that when you look at how Son was used under Ange Postecoglou, he was like pushed to the touchline. He was taking like Tyrese Spicer's levels of touches along the left touchline, which is just not where you think of seeing Son Heung-min. But it's also not how you get goals and assists from players if they're just hugging the touchline, right? And trying to like dribble their way all the way into the box. Like you're going to get dispossessed more often than not. So, or lose the shooting angle, what have you. So I think that keeping him in a central role is going to be paramount. Good news, they have Denny Bouanga. They don't even need Son on the left wing. But I think that there could be a lot of potential for those two to work much better than not just Olivier Giroud and Denny Bouanga, but I would actually argue Carlos Vela and Denny Bouanga, simply because I think that there's a little bit more off-ball willingness from Son than I saw from Carlos Vela, especially once he was like 2-3 years into being the captain and the face of LAFC. That was just going to become a very difficult sort of seeding of responsibility.
Yeah, even Son at 33 is going to be more dynamic than Vela was at 29 or whatever it is. I want to ask you, though, Jeff, more about the positional fit, because I'll be honest, if I have one concern about this move, and I think this move is awesome, by the way. I love that it's happening, but it is that, Son's best minutes, and most of his minutes, have come as a left winger cutting in on his right foot. And LAFC have the best left winger cutting in on his right foot in Major League Soccer in Denny Bouanga. I want to make sure I was understanding you right. Are you saying that you think Son should play more centrally, sort of off of another striker? Maybe that would maybe necessitate a shape change, sort of a 4-2-3-1, where Son is like sort of a pseudo 9, but he's really playing underneath another 9 with Bouanga on the left and somebody else on the right?
Yeah, I think that that's where you get the best out of him. And I think that when you look at where he was collecting the ball, like you go back to 22-23, for example, which was the final year under Antonio Conte. It was the last year before Postecoglou came in. When the team was a bit more fluid, he was actually collecting the ball much more in like the half spaces. So he was in the width of the box by the time he got on the ball. So there's cutting in, but it's not like Eden Hazard at Chelsea, where you're truly going from the touchline into the box and no one can stop you, or Alexis Sanchez, right? Like, I love that both of my reference points are a decade old to try to show how old this ideology is. That's the game's gone, lads. But I think that you need to get him closer. It makes sense. He has a scorer's instincts. He has the scorer's kind of first touch decision making, that sort of thing. And granted, he was struggling to keep up with the breakneck rate at which Postecoglou wanted them to operate. So his first touch was looking kind of sloppy last year as well. I think after November in particular, it looked like he dropped off to a point where LAFC fans are wondering, is he going to be okay for this level? I think he will be. I just think at this point, if you're going to get the best out of him as he's continuing to age, it makes sense to keep him in the areas where he will be most dangerous. And that's where, unfortunately, to your point, I think it might be more of that withdrawn thing rather than say you're a target man now or whatever. Yeah. But I think it will make sense to move him there. And just at the end of the day, it solves the natural potential headache of having him and Bouanga. And Bouanga is so clearly the left winger there, where it's you do kind of need to move him. You're not going to have one play 60, one play 30. That's insane.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So, I think that would be the pretty obvious solution. And they have the personnel to do it. The question is then, and what you're getting at, will Steve Cherundolo, with 4 months left of his tenure, suddenly make a radical reinvention and abandon a 3-man midfield, which is what he's been doing pretty much this entire time?
Seems unlikely to me. I'll put it that way. I mean, if there's a player that's going to push you to do that, signing Son Heung-min is probably a pretty darn good place to start on that front. It's also not really going to be Steve Trundle's problem long term, but it is his problem short term because LAFC are in title contention when it comes to MLS Cup. He's got a puzzle to solve, right? And that's sort of what I'm glad we got to this so quickly, really, because I think by far the most interesting part of all this is how does Son fit with LAFC? It is not as obvious. Like, if Denny Bouanga was not an LAFC player, I think it would be obvious. You probably plunk him on the left wing. You give him some positional flexibility, of course. But Denny Bouanga is an LAFC player. And yeah, there's a lot of smoke coming out of Mexico all the time about Denny Bouanga. Until somebody that we know reports on this more, I'm going to assume that Denny Bouanga is going to be around in LAFC for a good while longer. It is a puzzle to solve. And I don't know how this gets solved. I think your plan is a good one, Jeff. Like, I think that is a perfectly reasonable approach to take. I don't have any idea if that's what we're going to see, or if we're going to see Son on the left and Bouanga over on the right in a 4-3-3, or if we'll see Son as the 9 with Bouanga on one side, and by the way, they still have another DP spot open that they're, I'm sure, looking to fill sooner rather than later. There's just a lot of question marks for me about how exactly this works. The thing that I don't have a question mark about is that Son is a really good player still, and is going to, assuming some semblance of positional comfortability, nailed it. That was super easy to understand. Assuming he's in a spot where he is like somewhat comfortable and that fits his skill set. And I want to do some more thinking and looking and imagining of all this. But assuming that's the case, he's going to crush. Dude, his game is not just predicated on speed and on dynamic dribbling ability. His vision, his playmaking ability has been underrated. And the gulf between Son and like the average MLS defender is very wide. Very wide. Like John Mueller, I was talking about San Diego piece. John Mueller did a really good San Diego piece for The Guardian the other day. And there was a quote in there from Tyler Heaps about, I'm paraphrasing, excuse me, probably poorly, but this idea that Heaps is trying to, tell everybody how they're going to play with the ball. And he has to convince them that, hey, we're going to start building with our worst players, like our lowest paid players, our defenders, to get the ball through all the hard stuff to then get it to our highest paid best players on the other side of the field. Like, our best guys, our most salaried guys are not going to touch the ball until we've done so much of the hard work with our bad players, like our guys that aren't making as much money. He didn't say good and bad. He said higher paid and lower paid. Son's going to go up against those lower paid players, and I think he's going to do some damage. So I don't know how this all comes together, but shout out LAFC. This might be a league record incoming deal. I'm not sure if those figures have been fully parsed out yet, but I love this move. It's fun. It's going to be interesting. It's going to resonate with LA, and it's going to make them better. I really do believe that, even if we don't have the answer exactly, although I do like your suggestion, even if we don't know what this is going to look like, I think they're going to figure it out, man, one way or the other, and that should be terrifying for not just the rest of the West, but the rest of MLS. So I love that you brought the Son thing in. I'm sure we'll do more on that at some point down the line. Jeff, anything else on Son before I take us back to somebody from my list?
No, I think that you absolutely nailed it. I think that this puts them even higher in that, like, contenders bracket of the Western Conference, and I think they'll say that the conference could be open to them. And so, if we can exploit the defense of a team whose coach is already readily admitting it's like, their lower paid players are doing hard yards and thankless stuff to move pianos, like, just thwart them. Why not?
Get thwarted, everybody.
Get thwarted.
All right, let's stick in the Western Conference. I'm going to touch on Real Salt Lake, who have been busy in this window, not with the high profile stuff of LAFC or Vancouver or Miami, but they've been busy acquiring attacking talent, and they badly need it. So they've added Juan Cruz and Victor Olatunji, and I know people don't know who those people are, so I'm going to try to explain. Willie Agata joined back in the first window of the year from FKC. Now they've added Olatunji, who's a striker, like a pure 9, and they've added Juan Cruz, who is a much more positionally flexible attacking player. Why are they stacking the attack? Well, because their attack is not good. RSL have not registered more than 1.5 XG in a single game since a win against DC United in mid-June. They have done it just 6 times all season, right, according to FBref. So the attack's been bad, and it's been a problem ever since Andres Gomez left last summer, right? That is the test case for, man, it sucks when we lose a guy in the middle of the season. Like that, there's just no way around it. That's a huge proponent of some of the calendar switching that we are going to see happen at this rate. Everybody in Salt Lake knows that the attack needed some love. And if these reinforcements actually hit, RSL will be a tough out come playoff time. And I think they have a good shot of hitting. So here's what I like about these guys. Olatunji, like I said, traditional 9, can bully opposing center backs, can do a lot of damage off the ball. 25 years old, 18 goals across a couple of seasons in the Czech top flight across 3,000 minutes. So not a ton of minutes there, but produced at a high rate per 90. 2 goals in the Champions League last year for Sparta Prague. Showed some good stuff against Leverkusen in particular from the tape I've watched. He's got the inside track to start over Agata, and I think will elevate them. And importantly, won't be a DP. But I think they are legitimately improving up top at the 9. And then Ruan Cruz, who will be a DP. They brought him in on loan with an option to buy of $5 million, according to Tom Bogert. He had just joined Ruan Cruz from Botafogo. He had just joined Botafogo in Brazil for a reported $10 million fee. So this is a guy that Botafogo thought highly of. Botafogo are a bit of a chaos club, so I don't know, maybe a grain of salt there. But Cruz gives Pablo Mastroeni's team a change of pace option. And that is what they've needed so badly since Gomez and maybe to a slightly lesser extent Arango left or Arango's production dried up last summer. He's 24, positionally flexible, can play as a striker or a second striker or a winger, can attack 1v1 on the dribble, can hit a pass, can stretch opposing defenses with some of the off-ball runs that Gomez really did provide, and that was a huge unheralded part of what RSL made them so good, where they were in the Shield race for a little bit last year, right? Like with a lot of these same dudes, just not now with Arango and Gomez. I think Ruan Cruz is a really fun player, and he adds talent to this team, and that's what they need. Like they need quality pieces. They've had a hot run of form at MLS recently that's gotten them back in playoff conversation, and I can see a world in which Olatunji and Ruan Cruz and Diego Luna and Xavier Gozo, you'll note that I didn't say Diogo Gonçalves, but maybe I'll eat crow on that, who knows, but where those guys are on the field together, and it's working. And RSL is actually good, and at least more effective, far more effective than they are now in the final third. So props to RSL for seeing the need, addressing the need. I don't know that these are going to be slam dunks because there's a lot of reasons that transfers can go wrong and won't pan out. But to actually go and so clearly address a problem, you don't always see that in MLS or in soccer, period. So I want to shout out RSL for that because we haven't talked about them at all this summer. And we talk about them a lot for Diego Luna. Luna's having a good season, but he is not yet a guy who can carry you. And we've seen that very, very clearly this year. So they needed more, and they got more, and I like that.
Without help, right? Because I think that, I talked about with Diego, and that piece finally went live last week, right? And that was one thing that he had talked about was that, I should have more than 8 goals at the time of the interview. I should have more than 2 assists. Okay, how do you have more than 2 assists? Guys finish their chances, right? So, there is a good track record here for Ron in particular. I think that he sometimes does go by Ron, R-W-A-N, by the way, if you're just listening to this one. We're not saying Ron, like Ron Weasley in a terrible way.
I am. No, I have been, actually.
Like we just ate a lot of brisket and we can't fully articulate right now. We're clear of the brisket at this point. It does sound good. He was prolific in 2 seasons with Ludogorets in Bulgaria, which is also a club that will occasionally get into the Champions League and the Europa League, that sort of thing. But that's where he mostly has done his productivity. In Brazil with Santos, Vasco da Gama, and Botafogo, he really did struggle. So it will be interesting to see how he operates in a different kind of competition. It seems like Brazil kind of figured him out, but maybe MLS defenses won't do so as much. The other thing that I think is very interesting, RSL's website puts front and center that he likes video games and watching YouTube and TikTok. So he's just like all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
100%. I mean, what more do you need from that? There also was a signing picture of Ruan Cruz that was in front of these very industrial-looking double doors that I assume were just like a weird back corner of RSL's facility.
Yes,
some fun
that
stuff.
was so funny.
Some fun stuff all across the board.
And can I just say, by the way,
Please.
I think that we have established video games, YouTube, and TikTok enough in the culture where you probably need more specificity. Like if you walk up and say, I like video games and YouTube, people are like, it doesn't really fill the picture of who you are. I digress.
You ask me what am I watching, and I say I'm watching YouTube. Thank you very much. Don't ask any further questions about my interests. We're done. All right, Jeff, we have gone long, predictably so. I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm done. I have Thomas Muller stuff. You and Taylor did all the roster mechanism stuff last week. I want to do the fun stuff about how he fits, but we'll do that another time. Empty the chamber for me, Jeff. Run through whatever else you want to hit, and we can finish whatever we don't get today next week.
Sure. Steven Alzate is going to Atlanta, and I think that he could help a lot. I think that he has a profile of midfielder that they've really been missing. He signed a 6-year contract, which is also just not something that you see in MLS.
It's a long deal.
So he's here for the long haul.
I know. I just said we were going long. I believe Bartosz Slisz was on a 5-year deal, and that worked out really great for Atlanta. I don't know that the lesson from their current setup is let's sign dudes that haven't played in this league that maybe haven't been slam dunk obvious. We have to get this guy in for giant lengths of time, but maybe that is the takeaway. They need Alzate, either way. I don't know. They need that. They need that dude to be good at the base of midfield. That we can all agree on.
And like, if you want to look at his underlying numbers when he was with Hull City last year in the championship, which is another physical league, like, he was the best regular midfielder, central or defensive, in his true tackle win weight and actually getting people off the ball when he stuck a foot in, 75%. That's very, very good. He won 67% of his duels, 64% ball recovery rate, which is about where you want to be if you're a defensive midfielder. So, yeah, looks like he'll be more of a recirculating passer. Other guys are going to have to break lines, but I think that he could be a really good fit in the engine room and do some good defensive stuff. And now we move into a category that I created when you at first were like, let's list our favorite moves at the window. And then I added this one that said not favorite, but ... because they're just very interesting, and I don't quite get them for various reasons. So let's wade into the pool a little bit with just a fun one, which is that every single summer you will see players who are struggling to get moves to the English Championship. And I know we're saying this right after Steven Alzate. We haven't looked it up. Whoops. We'll get it before he starts playing games. I should have done that. I did all this research on his like dual win rates, and I didn't even check how to say the guy's name.
Dude, I bet it's so funny. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Yeah.
But he's a Scotland international, so you just don't know. But yeah, you're right. Let's go Alzate. So, championship. You can't find your club. You're struggling to get your moves, whatever the case may be. It's August, whatever. Every year you get a few of them who come into Major League Soccer. It's very fun. The EFL short-term agreement sort of thing. We've got Rob Holding going to Colorado for 18 months. He has not played much at all. Why is that? Well, major injury, unfortunately. He had an ankle surgery in February 2024. Has only played 400 minutes since. So if he's healthy, you know what the upside is. The upside is this is a guy who has been able to start in the Premier League at a young age. If not, maybe you got some good minutes out of him for 18 months, and he knows what he needs to do for his next club move. The other one, Ryan Porteous, I think that LAFC fans will be a little bit higher on for his upside. He is a really good kind of like stay-at-home sort of defender. He'll be able to do a lot of Aaron Long stuff while Aaron Long is absent, which helps. Good upfield passer as well. So, yeah, probably a new kind of bedrock for LAFC, who, again, I think has really vaulted probably past... they're into the top 3 or 4 contenders, I would say, in the Western Conference at this point, pretty comfortably. And they're on their talent-wise, they're on the ascendancy at a very good time of the season.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's even more on LAFC. It sounds like they're still interested in maybe adding another center back. Also, I know we didn't talk about it in the Rapid section, but I feel like the Rapids should be on David Martinez's watch at the moment. I'm just going to keep banging that drum that somebody needs to rescue David Martinez from LA because Steve Cherundolo won't play him a lot unless he's the right winger that's promised in your formational switch-up for Steve Cherundolo, in which case no one take him because he's going to be awesome. There's so much more that we didn't get to that I wanted to get to today. Milan Alaski to Philly, which we can talk about another time. Mentioned Thomas Muller. Atlanta also, we talked about Alzate. I do think it's Alzate. I flipped back to the other side. Not 100% sure, but I'm back over where you were originally, Jeff. They have like chopped and changed more than a half dozen players already in the summer window and may have more yet to do. We'll talk about them another time. Lots of transfer stuff that we want to get to. For now, Jeff, I will simply say this. Even if you're artless with your current landscape today, you are never artless. Thank you so much for joining me today. I massively enjoyed this. You're a legend. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. And Portland fans, you have a lot to look forward to in our next episode because we have some questions about your new DP.
Yes, we'll hit that another time. Jeff, let's end this sucker right now. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this episode. We appreciate you very, very much. And we'll be back in the feed tomorrow. Thanks again.